Hey overclockers, Keffy here. Today we're going to show off the 12.1 release of OCCT, a stability testing toolkit that I've used for a long time that's now bringing some really awesome, previously supporter-only stuff to the masses for free and will be available by the time you see this video. Now I've paid for these upgrades myself for a while now and they're absolutely worth it, but you get to enjoy them for free, as well as some other awesome updates to the software such as finally having a good replacement for AIDA64. We'll do some boring old normal testing at normal voltages, and then we're going to do some really scary stuff with my week-old shunted volt-modded Strix 4090. Let me start with a question. Do you think it's possible to shove 1500 watts through a 12 VH power connector? If you don't, you're about to be proven wrong by multiple power monitoring circuits and a really useful stability testing tool. But first, let me turn on my HVAC so our loop can start getting cold while we do more normal testing. Before I do, take note of the power reading. That's solely my PC right now, plus 100 watts or so for my monitors. The HVAC is entirely off right now. There's nothing else on the electrical panel that's running except for my PC and 2 monitors. So that reading is accurate, and it will update throughout this video live as I test. We're going to drop it all the way down so our cooler hits maximum cooling. It's a multi-stage HVAC, so if you don't set it as low as possible, it's not going to cool as hard as possible. Gotta love smart home stuff. Now, for those of you who don't know, OCCT is one of the tried and true options for testing the stability of your system. It's created by a friendly fellow named Jens and was the first released in 2003 as the overclock checking tool before even Half-Life 2 had come out. Today, it has become a golden standard in checking the stability of your PC and is used by businesses to test every pre-built gaming PC that leaves their assembly line. So it's taken seriously both by overclockers and businesses trying to make money. I have a ton of tools for every purpose, most of which you probably never heard of, and a lot of them you probably have too. But when I want to go to one place for everything, OCCT is usually my choice. It's got CPU, it's got GPU, it's got RAM, it's got VRAM, it's even got PSU tests available that stress both your CPU and your GPU at the same time. And now with the 12.1 release, you can test the bandwidth and the latency of both your cache and your memory too, much like the old AIDA64 tool that's largely lost to accuracy and popularity. So when your Discord buddies don't believe you're stable, you can whip out an OCCT certificate to prove every part of your system is, much like you do with 3D Mark scores. Now, what's really exciting and probably relevant to the largest number of people, though, is that the 3D adaptive test is now available to everyone. The 3D adaptive test is a feature that ingeniously uses the Unreal Engine in the background to put your GPU under different types of load. Uniquely and very importantly, it allows configurable variable load. Now, this means that not only are you running a tried and true game engine, replicating the exact commands that would be sent to a graphics card were you to play a game that used the Unreal Engine, for example, you're also able to better represent and accurately test and retest those loads that the games would present. Now, I'm going to present just how that feature and its very harsh friend, switch mode, works on my wall-mounted XOC setup. And here's a zoomed out view of the whole setup. Probes and wires all over the place. I've got my multimeter being used as a thermometer right now, plugged into the 12 VH power connector. Now, excuse me while I finally go off script and start rambling about all the cool stuff on the screen. Now, what is 3D standard and what is 3D adaptive? 3D standard was the original test to come out in OCCT, and it's just your standard run-of-the-mill test. It sends a bunch of, I believe it sends CUDA commands to the GPU to simulate load. And this is fine and great and all, but it's not actual like the kind of things you'd see from video games, right? It's just send it in there, see if it gets some load in it, and get some watts out, whatever. And that's great. It does help you test the stability, but it's better to be as close to the actual real workload as possible. So that's where 3D adaptive comes in. Now, not only is it adaptive, it's also a real game engine, like I had said earlier. It's the Unreal Engine, right? Um, and so basically all this testing that you're doing is going to as closely as possible. Now it's probably best that you test with the actual games you want to play with, of course. But the key thing here is that with adaptive, you can set the exact percentage. So like let's say you know that you have an issue at I don't know 80% load. You can go back, tweak, try it again, put in the exact numbers, get the exact same load, and try again. And it's a lot closer to applying the scientific method to overclocking your graphics card. Um, so we're gonna go through this. We're gonna see how high the wattage goes on 3D standard. We're gonna see how high it goes on 3D adaptive at 100%. We're gonna do variable mode from 20 to 100%, increasing 5% every 2 seconds. You can configure this however you want. And the very stressful switch mode, which if you could hear the coil whine, which you can't because I've got all the audio filtering on, but it's it sounds scary when you add a lot of watts, and that's not the fault of the software. That's just these graphics cards. You do the same thing in Solar Bay, dude. Anyways, so let's go ahead and start the testing. We are at 1.1 volts. Despite this saying 1.05, that's just because we're using the EVC2 to control it. But I'll go ahead and increase that anyways, just so that our clocks don't get dropped artificially. But otherwise, we are at stock clock speeds. Okay. So the voltage didn't actually change, of course. And you can see the voltage. Oh, whoops, I actually had that panel misaligned, whatever. So here's the correct panels. Here's the voltage, 1.1. You can see it coming from the EVC2. So we're going to run through these tests, and we're going to put usage limit 100 and shader complexity to 4. Now you can go to 8, but the thing with that is it's so much load that the FPS slows down, and it actually ends up pulling less wattage. So you want to sit right around in the middle. And you can see now our HVAC's kicked in. It's pulling about, let's see, we've got 3,500 on the HVAC, and then 300 from the PC. Or sorry, 3,500 total, 300 to the PC. So when I turn this on, you're actually going to see that chart go up immediately. Let's give it a run. All right. So it looks like we are hitting just about, what is it? That's the max from earlier. So the average takes about 30 seconds to increase on here. Let me slow this down really quick. We'll switch to the slower average because we don't need 29 right now with we'll turn that back on for switch mode, but for this purpose we're gonna make this a little bit more readable. So looks like standard testing is right around 700. Yeah, okay. So our temperature is super stable with this loop dropping down 45 Celsius. The loop is at 18 Celsius so far. It'll be cold by the time we get to the increased voltage. So let's stop this test. So let's say about 720, 730. Let's switch over to the average just so I just stop guessing. It should be accurate now. Yeah. Okay. So we've got an average of 715 watts. Now let's turn that off. And as you can see in the power meter in the bottom right, that tracks perfectly. Minus 752 watts reported at my electrical panel. So that's how we know, because see, if you notice in the bottom right, it says shunt modded. The graphics card can't actually track the accurate power consumption right now. I've basically tricked it. So not only do I have a 1000 watt XOC BIOS, I also have shunted the resistors so that you cannot, or I'm sorry, so the card is not limited to 1000 watts. We can go even beyond that. So pretty much just ignore this. This is useless. Just pay attention to everything else. Okay. So yeah, so we had what was it, 700 something? Whatever, we can go back. So now let's try out 3D adaptive. Now we're just gonna set this to 100%, right? We're not gonna use the actual adaptive part. Nope. Sorry. I love using my numpad, but my numpad is also my scene switcher. Okay, so we're gonna switch to 100% intensity, and let's see how high that goes. All right. So the thing with the adaptive load is that it is going to be less, right? In a lot of workloads. Um, because it's not just like trying to straight stress out your system to the max, even at 100%. And I'm pretty sure part of it is because I'm recording as well, and it's not just like straight kicking out the recording completely. So adaptive is really good for this. Even with my 800-watt power limit, or well, really unlimited power limit, but even though it hits 800 on the basic one, the adaptive one doesn't go that high up. So let's go ahead and try out variable mode. So this is going to show us going from low to high. We're going to start at 20 and we'll go up to 100 and we will increase by 5 every 2 seconds. So this video is an hour long. Now, right when it starts, it does have a large spike while it initializes everything and figures out exactly what peak load is. And then from there, it's going to slowly increase. So we can see right now it is currently running at 45%, and we are pulling just about half as much power as we were before. So it's just going to slowly increase over time. And this is really good for stability testing because you can see right around where it actually crashes, right? So you don't have to sit in a game and play a game and just sit there and wait for it to eventually crash. You can actually replicate the exact same load that made it crash by using the adaptive test and especially the variable and being able to set the percentage specifically, which is super awesome. We're going to let that run for one more cycle. And right now we are pulling 4,000, just over 4,000 watts to not only run this computer, but also cool it. So our average on that was about 290, 300. Okay. Now we're going to test out switch mode, which is basically it turns the load on, off really rapidly, really hard. And it is super stressful. And if I turn this to the other mode, you can actually see this occurring a little easier. Wait, there we go. Okay. All right, yeah. So you can see it just goes up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And once we switch to a higher voltage, you'll be able to see this on the electrical panel. It just starts waving up and down constantly. But yeah, this is the most stressful test OCCT has by far for sure. Um, I'm more of a fan of variable, but if you're just looking to just straight stress it out and just like this is the best you got, right? And there's alternatives that really, really push your graphics card, but they're just such unrealistic workloads that unless you're doing XOC or just you're just a stability king, this is I think the better choice for any gaming OC in my opinion. Now, at normal voltages, and this is another topic of this video, right? The 12 VH power. I've had a lot of people telling me you can't pull 1500 watts through a 12 VH power. And that's half correct. You can't do it without generating heat. And that multimeter right now is currently plugged in. Just it's basically jammed right into this to the connector, and you will see that start to rise as we increase the voltage. But it stays within pretty reasonable temperatures because we've got a gigantic air conditioner pointed at it. So let's go ahead and stop the test, and we're going to go over to our EVC2 now, and we are going to increase the voltage a lot. So I've tested this before, so I already know where this is going to land more or less. But if you were to do this, please increase voltage slowly. Every card is different, and it takes a tenth of a second for it to ramp up to whatever power it's using, and probably even less time to kill itself. So be careful about that. One sec, let me disable data logging because there's a bug in this version. Where did it go? Okay. Gotta stop the data logging first. And then apply changes. Start. Okay. There we go. All right. So now our voltage is at 1.25, and notably, there's a quirk about the 4090 that I've covered in my previous videos. But when you increase the voltage past the stock voltage of 1.1, it will just start pulling power for no reason at all. I have no idea why it does this. No one has any idea why it does this that I'm aware of. No one's told me that anyone has any idea. But it's nothing to be concerned about. I have run it doing this for, I think, like 24 hours straight before with no issues, no degradation. So when you go to 1.15, don't freak out when the power increases. But now we're gonna now we're gonna get into the fun stuff. So we're gonna do those same tests, except at a significantly higher voltage, and hopefully nothing breaks. I'm running on 20 amp circuits. For those of you that are wondering how the heck I'm going to pull this much power, every single outlet in my house has 20 amps, so I'm safe. And that that multimeter is threatening to die on me right now, so we got to hurry this up. Okay, so let's start with the standard test, and we're just going to go risk it for the biscuit, man. Check this shit out. Yeah, baby. WIA errors out the ass. It does not like this, but yep. And you will see the VH power connector start to rapidly rise in temperature. I mean, not super rapidly, but it will start in a little bit. There it goes. And it looks like the max power we're hitting now is 1630 watts. So, Jesus. That's the max. It's not constantly pulling that, of course, because the power supply is, reporting about 1600. But yeah, so for the standard test at 1.2 volts, OCCT can pull 1600 watts. But that's just the standard test. That's the test you run when you want to see power consumption, right? Just straight raw power consumption. That's a good test for that. But if you want to do true load, like I said, adaptive, which is now available for free to everyone, is a super great choice. Let's just start out with flat intensity 100. Yep. So you'll see, the power is not constant. If you were to run other stability testing software, it's pretty much a flat power consumption. And that's great. It's a lot of power, but the problem is that instability generally comes with voltage changes, with power changes, because it's not like it just says, okay, here's the new number, and then everything is that number. It has to rise or lower to that number, and very often it will overshoot or undershoot. So if you do something like switch mode, which I'm going to show you shortly, your voltage is just all over the place, just jumping, trying to match it. So those really stable, consistent, constant tests are actually not that great, even though they're pulling a lot of wattage. You want something that's going to change it over time, and that's why this test is so great. So let's go ahead and switch to variable mode now and see what it looks like as it ramps up with such intense voltage. And yeah, our settings are still here, so let's do that one more time. Actually, you know what? A better way to do this test, I'm going to switch this to max, and then I'm going to reset it because it's kind of just all over the place. Kind of hard to tell what it's doing. What am I doing? Where do I do it? Oh yeah, right here. There we go. Yeah. Never mind. I didn't press it right. Okay, there we go. Okay. What? Oh, right, because the car. I forgot because the card is still actually pulling power because of the voltage. Anyways, all right, whatever. Screw it. Screw it. We'll just look at the yeah, whatever. That'll work. All right. I'm waiting on my PMD from Elmore so I can get a little bit more accurate readings instead of just looking at the wire view screen. But it still gives you a pretty good idea of how much power is actually being pulled. I think that's actually my renderer that's just constantly pulling that power in the background. But you can see this workload and what it's doing. So it's slowly rising up, and it's just adding more and more load, and that's all there is to it. And then it'll cycle back down, and then it'll go back up, and you can just leave it there. And if you pass these variable and switch tests, you'll probably survive in any games you play too. So, all right. Now let's do the scary one. Um, so if you could hear this, you'd be terrified. But I'll just go ahead and show it to you. And you can see it just goes 1,000 down, 1,000 down. Like the power supply has a pretty good average overall, right? The Thor, it's showing about 900, but it's not showing the peak whatsoever because the peak is happening so rapidly. Um, But you can see it cycling every so often on the electrical panel when the times align just right. And it is just going constantly right now. It is it is a stressful test. I'm not gonna lie. As you can see, despite this really stressful test, the temperatures are actually staying pretty good. Even with thousands of watts flowing through this graphics card, because of the liquid metal, because of the water cooling. I mean, my loop is only at 16 degrees Celsius so far. It hasn't even dropped down to where it usually is, which is about 6. And it's staying cold. So, if you can get good cooling, you can do a lot with these cards. They are insanely efficient, actually, believe it or not. If you've got liquid metal on them or whatever your choice is, I prefer liquid metal. You can make some magic for sure. So I want to do one more test while we're here. Risk it for the biscuit. Furthest I've ever gone so far was 1600, right? So we're going to set voltage to, I'm not going past 275 because I really, I have a GALAX to replace this, but I don't want to do it this early. So we're going to set voltage to 1.275. And it should be noted, I killed the card at 1.3 with 1,000 watts. I'm not convinced it was actually the core that died. I think it was actually a power component, and the tough was not as strong. But y'all are about to see whether or not my card survives. I didn't plan this at all. Oh man! All right, run it. Oh, yeah, that's all my power supply can give it. This is the 1,600 watt power supply, so it's pulling as much as it can, dude. 500 amps. What is this? Where's it hitting? Oh yeah, juicy. But it's actually the hotspot's like 90, the memory's 38, GPU 65. Even the VRMs are only 61 degrees now, and for sure they're gonna heat up, but Strix can handle a lot with liquid metal, dude. That's 1,600. What is the max? Where's the max? 1,649. All right, we're gonna stop. I want to have a card by the end of this. But there you have it. 1,650 watts pulled over the wire by OCCT. Um, so there's gonna be a few more features other than what I've mentioned. There's a GPU compute test for enterprise for those really like $20,000-$40,000 versions of the 4090. Basically, I don't remember the exact designation, but the enterprise version of 8102. There is a CPU core cycling revamp. So you'll be able to actually target specific CPUs, groups of cores. It's really awesome. I'm going to cover that in a later video. And they've also added a cache and memory test, much like ADA64, which I'm also going to cover in another video. So anyways, just lots of exciting stuff coming from OCCT. This thing is awesome, guys. Like, CPU tested, memory tested, GPU tested, VRAM, power, everything, stability. They've even got a benchmark that you can post publicly. I mean, it's all in one. Yench is an awesome guy. If you love it, throw him a couple bucks, get some extra features. Yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. And I think the next video is going to feature my new GALAX 4090 Hall of Fame. I'm going to be picking up some, I think a Dower. Yeah, it's called a Dower from Sebi. And I'll be doing liquid nitrogen for the first time on a GALAX. I might test it on the Strix first before I do it on my GALAX. But I've got the stuff. So stay tuned. Next video is going to be some really cool shit. In the meantime, 12.1's out as soon as you see this video. Enjoy. Until next time, overclockers, push the limits.